Hi everybody, welcome back to Sunshine Soap and Candle Company. Today I'm going to be revisiting the topic of how to make your own liquid laundry detergent. Back in December of 2023, I shared a laundry detergent tutorial, and since the publication of that tutorial, I've had lots of questions on how to substitute certain ingredients, if you can add more fragrance, or substitute different surfactants for other detergents. And so today I'm going to be sharing another tutorial on laundry detergent and also answering some of those commonly asked questions in a new formula. In this video today, I'm going to be going over the full visual process and tutorial of how to make this laundry detergent, and we're going to be diving deep into how to add in more fragrance oil to the original formula that I shared back in December, and also talking a little bit about substitutions on those detergents. If you would like to take advantage of the full written recipe with percentages and a full written step-by-step detailed tutorial, please head on over to my Patreon campaign. This will be published over there at the $5 level. I'll go ahead and put the link to my campaign in the description box below for you. If you haven't had a chance to check out my campaign yet, I really hope that you will. Upon sign up, you gain access to hundreds of formulas and tutorials, ones like this and also ones in the hair care, skin care, candle making, and soap making areas. There's a ton to take advantage of. So the campaign is 5 years old, and we've been providing weekly recipes and tutorials over there now for 5 years. So there's just a ton to take advantage of. It's a great way to connect with me and other makers. And there are other tiers also besides the $5 tier, each with their own unique benefits for you to take a look at and take advantage of if you want. I'm a crowd-funded content creator, so your support really means the world to me and allows me to continue to do what I do best, which is sharing my weekly recipes and tutorials with you. So thank you so much for all of your contributions. All right, let's get started. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and work with the fragrance oil that I've decided to use for this formula, and my testing of it has been working out great. So in my initial video tutorial on laundry detergent, I used a fragrance oil at a very low rate, and there's a couple things to consider when you're making a laundry detergent or using fragrance oils in any formula, but you want to go ahead and make sure you're checking the usage rates on how much you can actually use of the fragrance oil of your choice in your formula. So you're going to want to look at the IFRA chart on usage rates for laundry detergent. I believe it's category 10A or B. I'll have to double check on that. But in my first tutorial, I was using the maximum usage rate for the particular fragrance that I was using that was allowed. And it was a lower rate, but it's a great formula for sensitive skin or for people who don't really want a lot of fragrance. So this one's going to give you, we're going to be able to use more fragrance in this formula because the fragrance that we're using today has a higher usage rate for laundry detergents. So we're going to be using Cashmere Plum, and this is by Candle Science, and it's a very clean and kind of fruit forward fragrance. It also works really great in candles. So, and it's a good room freshener as well, but it's got beautiful notes of cashmere which make it smell nice and clean, and it's got those tart fruit notes at the top. It's a very good fragrance and nice and strong. So we're going to go ahead and pour in, we're preparing our fragrance oil. Because we're adding in more fragrance oil, there are certain things that we have to do to prepare it for our formula. So I'll go ahead and start by just pouring off the amount of fragrance that we're going to be using for this formula. Alright, so now that we have the fragrance oil poured off, we need to go ahead and add a solvent. So we are going to be using polysorbate 80, and we're using polysorbate 80 for a couple reasons. So we need our fragrance oil to be soluble in our detergents and water. So the rest of the formula is going to be made up of detergents, water, preservative, and as you know, oils and water don't mix. They can with the surfactants at a small rate, at a lower rate. So if you revisit my first video, you'll see that we're not using any polysorbate 80 because the surfactants used in that formula can solubilize the amount of fragrance that we're using with no problem. Once you get higher in the oil volume or percentage, you are going to have to find a way to solubilize the oil so that it combines with your watery ingredients and doesn't eventually separate out. So today we're using polysorbate 80 for a few reasons. It's going to give us great solubilizing properties. It's going to help the oil to combine with the waters and the surfactants with no problem. And also it's its own surfactant, so it does have some cleansing properties to it. So it will help boost the cleansing properties of our formula just a little bit. So I'm just adding it into my fragrance. There we go. And then I'm going to take a stirring rod and I'm going to mix the polysorbate 80 and the fragrance oil, mixing them up. It's kind of hard to tell on the camera, but you can kind of see little streaks of floating oil while you're stirring. You just want to make sure that you get it completely combined and that all of that looks clear before you add it to anything else. You just want to make sure it's completely solubilized. All right, I'm going to go ahead and set this little solution aside, and then we're going to move on to the next phase. So the next phase is we're just going to be pouring off the water that we're using in this formula. We're making an 800 gram batch today, and you can use the percentages in the tutorial to scale up or down if you want to make a bigger batch. And if you have questions regarding why we're making a liquid one versus the one with cold processed soap, go ahead and revisit my first video. I talk a little bit there about why I have opted to make a liquid laundry detergent versus the kind with the cold processed soap shreds or flakes. So we're going to go ahead and weigh off the water needed for this formula. And then what I'm going to do with this water is I'm going to pop it in the microwave for 30 seconds. And the reason I'm doing that is because the next step is to go ahead and combine the polysorbate 80 and the fragrance oil with the water and get it all dissolved. And it has a much easier time dissolving when this water is warm. If you add it in cold, it will kind of clump up, it will dissolve, but it takes a lot longer for everything to combine and dissolve. So we just want to go ahead and warm this up for 30 seconds before adding in the fragrance oil and polysorbate 80. All right, so I warmed it for about 45 seconds and it's sitting at about 123 degrees Fahrenheit. So we're going to go ahead now and stir in the polysorbate 80 and fragrance oil. You're going to notice the formula turn white right away. That's because polysorbate 80 is also an emulsifier. So it's going to combine the oils and the water also like an emulsifier does, but it's not going to stay white. But it does temporarily do that. So now my formula looks like a white and cloudy water, and we're getting a little bit of bubbles on the top just from that polysorbate. It is a little bit of a surfactant as well. It's a pretty amazing versatile ingredient and skin friendly, very skin friendly. It's used in a lot of cosmetics, bath bombs and things like that. Just going to take my spatula and just make sure everything is picked up off the bottom. Again, sometimes that it can clump up a little bit in this phase. 45 seconds was the perfect amount of time. I'm not detecting any clumping or anything like that. Everything is very well dissolved. So the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and start adding in our surfactants. Now the surfactants in this formula are what's responsible for the cleansing powers, and they also are responsible for making bubbles in your formula. This formula is safe for HE washers. That's the only kind of washer I have, and that's what I've been using this formula in. And you can use it to the maximum usage rate in your washer with no problems at all. So this is the next phase that I wanted to talk about with you. In my initial formula, I used a lower amount of surfactants. Again, my initial formula was really geared towards people who have sensitive skin or wanted a detergent for sensitive skin. And this one is going to be also probably pretty good for people with sensitive skin because we're using some very skin-friendly surfactants and we're not exceeding any usage rates. We're still using very mild and plant-based surfactants, but I am bumping up the surfactant amount in this formula compared to the first one. I am bumping it up about double. And again, it will still work in your HE washer. And the reason I'm doing that is a couple reasons. So we are adding more fragrance oil, so I did want to add a little bit more to the solubilizing properties to this formula. And also I wanted a little bit more of a powerful cleanser. So I wanted to show you that you can also up the surfactants in this formula. And I know a lot of you are super happy with the first formula, so am I. But this is just to show you there's variations and also to answer some of those commonly asked questions. So this one is using more surfactant than the original. And the first one, although we are using the same surfactants, I'll talk about substitutions as we go along. So the first surfactant I'm going to be adding in is some sodium lauryl ether sulfate, otherwise known as SLES, not the same as sodium lauryl sulfate, SLS. They are related, but SLS is known to be more harsh on the skin than SLES, and so that's why I'm opting to use the SLES. But SLES has really great foaming, lathering, and cleansing properties and is very mild. So, and it's detergenty, so I like it for that reason. A lot of people will opt not to use it if they want to be sulfate free, because this obviously does contain sulfates. You can do a couple things here. You can replace this with, we're going to be using cocamidal propylbutane also in this formula. You can just replace this SLES with more cocamidal propylbutane, or you can replace it with another surfactant like cocoa glucoside. Cocoa glucoside would be a good example of something you could swap this out with, although the ratios would be a little bit different. So if you're over on the campaign and you have questions about the ratios, just let me know, because I would opt for the cocoa glucoside to probably be a secondary or not the primary surfactant, but the second or third surfactant used. So the ratios then would change on your other surfactants, but it would be a good substitute. So we're going to go ahead and weigh out the SLES. I also have a patron that made the original formula just a few days ago, and we were discussing, she had been messaging me discussing substitutions and what else she could use. And I will have to think about which surfactant she said she used that I was not familiar with, but she's having great results with as well. It's one commonly used in laundry detergents. Okay, the next one we're going to be using is cocamidal propylbutane. This is a very commonly used surfactant, super gentle, made from coconuts, totally plant-based, makes great bubbles, and has really good cleansing properties. So we're going to be using cocamidal propylbutane. This is also very skin friendly. It's in a lot of shampoos, body washes, facial washes, just because it's so mild. But it also has great cleansing properties. So again, this is a very skin friendly formula. Even though we've bumped up the surfactant matter, it's still relatively low in surfactants. And then the last one we're going to be using is desylglucoside. Now this is also another plant-based mild surfactant. As you can see, my formula is starting to get clear. Remember we talked about it wouldn't stay white and cloudy, but we're going to be using desylglucoside, again another plant-based mild surfactant. If you had the SLES and the cocamidal propylbutane, you could replace the desylglucoside with cocoa glucoside as well. This is the third surfactant, and we're using it at the smallest rate, not as my primary surfactant, just because it doesn't have quite the cleansing or lather factor that the others do, but still very mild. It does help to boost foam and cleansing of the other surfactants. So we're going to go ahead and give this a stir. Just making sure everything is combined. As you can see, my formula is starting to clear up. And everything is starting to combine nicely. Getting a really nice, smells so good. Just a really nice and clear formula. I'm getting some bubbles on the top here. So I'm going to go ahead and spritz it with some rubbing alcohol. Okay, we are getting ready now to go ahead and add in a preservative. So we're sitting right at 89 degrees, which is great. We're going to go ahead and add in some preservative, and today we're going to be using some Germall Plus. This is from Crafter's Choice Wholesale Supplies Plus, and that's actually where I got all of my surfactants. Recently, Wholesale Supplies Plus for me has been the best place to get the bulk surfactants, because if you spend over $100, the shipping is free, and that makes a big difference when you're buying large containers of things. Alright, so we're using Germall Plus because it is used mainly for water-based type formulas, and it's got a wide spectrum of pH that it can go into without killing it off. We're going to go ahead and add it in now. You just don't want your formula to be too hot before you add this in, because it can kill the preservative if your formula is too hot. So there we go. We're just going to go ahead and give that a stir. And right now, as you can see, my formula is water thin. I do want to go ahead and thicken it up to a traditional like laundry detergent type consistency, but I want to wait till my formula is room temperature, because it's too hard to judge viscosity when your formula is warm, because it's always going to be thinner. So we wait till it gets to room temp before we thicken it, so we have an idea of what the thickener is actually doing. So I'll be right back when this has reached room temperature, and then we'll go ahead and add in our thickener. While that is cooling, I wanted to go ahead and show you another formula here that I've been experimenting with. So I wanted to see if you could up the fragrance in the original formula without the use of polysorbate 80. Some people don't like using polysorbate 80. They have their own reasons for not wanting to use it. So this is another option. I'm just going to give you a little hint here. So what the maximum amount of fragrance that I've put in here is 3% of the formula. This is higher. The one that we're making today is higher than 3% of the formula. So what I wanted to let you know is you can go up to as high as 3% in your fragrance oil without the use of polysorbate 80 using the formula that I'm sharing with you today. Meaning I bumped the surfactant matter up from the original formula to kind of bump up the solubilizing properties, and I've used 3% fragrance oil in this formula, and as you can see, it's completely homogeneous. There's no separation and still smells nice and strong. You can do that. I'll go ahead and put that in my tutorial as well over on Patreon. I'll put the difference between the one with poly 80 and the one without, and then that way you can make your decisions on which ones you want to make. I would not go higher than 3% on the fragrance oil in this one, just because once you go higher than like a 3% range, you do really risk separation from your oils and your waters. But I wanted to share this with you so that if you didn't want to use polysorbate 80 or you didn't have any, you still can make one with a little bit more fragrance oil, just not as much. And in fact, when you very first add the fragrance oil to this one, it goes pure white as it's trying to solubilize everything and combine, and it stays cloudy and white for several hours before it goes back to clear. And this is what it looks like, you know, several days later. So it can be done. All right, we have reached around 76 degrees Fahrenheit, and that is about room temperature in my house right now. So we are ready to go ahead and add in that thickener. So today I'm going to be using liquid Crotix for the thickener because this formula as is doesn't need very much Crotix at all to get the formula thick. And remember, we're making a laundry detergent, so actually you don't want it to be super thick. Laundry detergents are usually a little bit more on the fluid and thin side. So we're going to go ahead and pour a little bit in. This is an as needed product, so you use what you need to get it to your viscosity. So I'm just going to start out by pouring maybe a teaspoon or less. Remember, you can always add more, but if this formula gets too thick, it's really hard to then thin it back out. So you want to make sure you're stirring in between each addition of thickener because it takes a minute for it to kind of incorporate and get more viscous. All right, so we're just going to add a little bit more. I'm gaining a little bit of viscosity already, but not enough. So we're just going to go ahead and add a little bit more, continue to stir, and I'll bring you back when this has gotten to the thickness that I desire. All right, so now we've gotten to the viscosity that I like for a detergent. So as you can see, it's not too thick, but it's not too thin either. You want it to just be able to move through your machine and your clothes freely without a lot of effort. And as you can see, it's a nice and clear formula. You could add a little bit of water-soluble dye in here if you wanted, but it's totally not necessary, especially if you're someone that wants to keep it dye-free. So here's the bottom of a prior batch that I'm using up. So as you can see, it just turns out to be a totally perfectly clear formula, and we're just going to go ahead and add to this. So most laundry detergents fall between the 7 and 10 range on the pH scale, and this one reads at around a 7, almost exactly at a 7. So if you are changing out the surfactants, try to choose ones that are maybe a little bit higher on the pH range because you do want it to be in that range. If you go much lower than that, it just doesn't have as easy of a time like breaking through dirt and oil and grease. So we're going to go ahead and just add this into my existing batch here. And we're just going to go ahead and cap it off. And there you go, everybody. That is how you make your own stronger smelling laundry detergent. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please remember to give it a thumbs up. Leave me some comments and questions below. That really means a lot to me. Share this video with a friend, and why not subscribe to my channel? All right, everybody, catch you on the next video. Keep shining. Bye.